think when we're talking about the importance of why enhancement in the engagement of credit rating agencies with African countries is important, we have to keep in mind that this has a bearing on the ability of African government to improve the life of their population. Why? Africa, I think there are two undisputed facts. Africa is the region where the cost of capital is the highest. Africa also is the region where progress toward the SDGs is the slowest. So, and there is a direct link between the high cost of capital and the inability of countries to make adequate progress toward the SDGs. So, if you have any way to reduce the cost of capital, indirectly you're saving life, indirectly you're improving living conditions. So the reason why it is important to improve engagement with credit rating agencies is because it is a potential way to improve the ability of African countries to lower the cost of capital. Because credit ratings assessment are important. They have a direct implication on the cost of capital. And the reality is what we have seen from the experience of our own organization, AfriCatalyst, which has been actually implementing with some partners, some dedicated initiative aimed at very much helping African countries to better understand the credit rating process, but also to better engage with credit rating agencies. What we are seeing is this is very much critical in not only allowing them to very much understand how the process works, but also in very much identifying ways to improve their engagement with credit rating agencies. And we have not been only doing it with African countries, but also with credit rating agencies. Someone said that they have been improving their engagement lately. This is very much critical, and I think this is something that we didn't see in the past. So what we are foreseeing is by very much engaging with stakeholders, starting with governments, but also advocates and civil society and all of that, credit rating agencies are able to very much understand their insight and very much able to very much improve their processes. They recognize that their processes are not are perfect and they need to improve it, and they have been doing progress to that. By engaging with government and African countries, they can actually speed up that process because it is critical for them to very much understand how those governments actually sort of see their work and how they can very much also share the type of input and information and data that are needed to very much do their work. One last thing that I would say is that one thing that we have seen also as part of our experience is that many countries have not been able to very much understand not only the process, but very much engage well by providing them the information they need. So by improving that engagement, I think this is a shortcoming that we will be able to overcome and hopefully, of course, improve the ability of those countries to reduce the cost of capital.
Thank you. And I think what also is important to note is that when cost of capital is decreased and thereby more investments unlocked in the social fabric and infrastructure, then again, of course, the country becomes more interesting for private sector investments, and the return on investment and investments is greater. So there is a cycle, of course, that we need to enter in and maybe get out of the more vicious cycle of narratives influencing investment decisions, maybe also narratives influencing ratings. That would be a question also maybe to you if you would like to delve on that. Is there, because there is the criticism that some of the ratings, maybe especially the subjective part of the rating process, but also to a degree maybe the one that is more based on data, is also not informed enough by local knowledge, by local context knowledge, which is also, of course, something that I think is important, that it's not one market, but many markets. So maybe you could go a bit deeper on this and also say what do you think African governments concretely need to do, maybe in the short, medium, longer term, and also what you, from your perspective, would like Moody's and others to do even better.
Yeah, no, I think you're perfectly right, Stefan. One thing that we have heard over and over again from African government is credit ratings agencies fail to very much understand the reality of their own economies, and they're not necessarily reflected in their own assessment. There is a part of it that is definitely, of course, true. There is another part maybe that is fed on by a sort of a misconception. The reality is, if you are able to, as far as African countries are concerned, as you're saying, if they're able to very much improve their credit profile, they would be able, of course, to very much get better ratings. And how do you do so? I think there are many ways. First of all, you have to understand that credit rating is essentially an opinion on how a country can repay on a timely basis and in full. So if you're able to very much improve your creditworthiness, you should be able to get better ratings. And how do African countries can do so? I think it is understood that they can do it by improving their fiscal management, their debt management. They can also do it by improving their statistical sort of systems. They can do it also by very much reducing whatever is able to sort of increase the risk or credit risk that those economies are facing. The reality is, the problem is Africa is not only faced with actual risk. What is also very much being said, or that we hear from many African countries, is there is also perception of risk that is also being channeled through some credit rating assessment. Is it true or not? I think that's not the question. The question is how we can address that. And I think it comes back to what we were talking about earlier, about the need for improved engagement between all stakeholders. It's the government on one side, credit rating agencies on the others, but also other type of stakeholders that are also very much involved. One other thing that I would add is, if very much you want to improve credit profile in African countries, of course, growth is the best way to go so. But to do so, you have to address, of course, the many issues that they're facing, including the high depth of growing debt vulnerabilities. But if you ask me, the reality is it's not only African countries to very much address those issues. It's also credit rating agencies to very much understand and see that there is a need to be more transparent in their methodologies. And you have to actually recognize that a lot of progress has been done by many big three sort of credit rating agencies in putting together out their methodologies. But I think one additional issue that needs to be addressed is how, as part of the process, you can also shed more transparency in the work of credit rating committees. You may actually have great methodologies, but if at the end of the day the decision is taken through a voting majority by a number of people without necessarily a lot of transparency, I think there is an issue there. And I think one last thing that I would say there also is, I think it is critical to know that it's not only African countries, or actually it's not only by addressing the credit rating issues that you can solve the cost of capital. It's just one part out of many other sort of moving factors that needs to be addressed.
What do you think about this assessment as one of the most important things to move forward? Bringing in some more actors like the multilateral actors, the World Banks, the MDBs, is that something that you see? And where do you think we need to put pressure or convince to have more purposeful action like Daniel described? Daouda, please.
Well, thank you, Stefan. You mentioned that I am a member of the G20 Africa panel that was set up by South Africa, and I'm very much honored to be. Of course, I'm not speaking on their behalf here on this panel, but what I can say on that is it is very much critical that we think of the importance of reducing the cost of capital not as something that only sort of is under the responsibility of governments and credit rating agencies. It involves an ecosystem of actors. So what are we talking about? When you're talking about cost of capital, you're talking about the issues that are related to the pricing, the assessment, the sharing, and mitigation of risk. And for each of those processes, I think there are different actors. So on the pricing, of course, credit rating agencies play a big role because of their ratings. That informs, of course, investors as they price risk. The IMF and IFIs also play a role through their debt sustainability analysis in the pricing of risk. But so if you want to really reform the sort of multilateral system, you have to see how you can facilitate engagement between all of those actors and, of course, government, and try to see how they can very much improve that pricing and make it at least not only fair, but also very much adequate. That's one. When you're talking about the sharing and mitigation of risk, you're talking about how you can also reform the global financial architecture so that MDBs, for instance, that plays a key role in that area, can do it in a better way. And I think so long as we are not able to address those issues, it's going to be very difficult to reduce the cost of capital, because I think what we might end up having is this situation where actually we have huge perceived risk, and sometimes that perception of risk is even more damaging than actual risk, and that's what is happening. So if you're able to very much put all those actors together and find the way to very much find the solution, and I think we will be able to reduce the cost of capital. One last point. I think when the MDBs under the G20 leadership actually felt like their callable capital was not valued enough, the global community actually called the CRA, the credit rating agencies, MDBs, and all around the table, and they try to find a solution. We should do the same thing with also when it comes to cost of capital, when it comes to also how African countries are rated and how the risk is priced in those countries. If we do so, I think there is potentially a lot of sort of positive implication that can hopefully facilitate their ability to mobilize low-cost financing.
Thank you. Yeah.